Hey everyone, and welcome to An Operator's Blog. In this episode, we will be discussing pivoting your US-India SaaS startup into the age of AI. Joining me today is Karthik Suresh, co-founder of DoubleO.ai. It's an AI agent startup that is automating workflows. And I know Karthik for many years now. He has been a product leader at Meta. He started his career on Wall Street, was a founding member of Craft, which was an early stage startup, and so really has seen product management in Silicon Valley from many angles. And now with Double O, Karthik, I think you're sort of building products at the edge of AI. So super excited to have you today for this episode.
Thanks, Amitra. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So let's get right down to it. So Karthik, I want to begin by tell us more about like DoubleO.ai. How did you kind of land up on this idea? I know you have had a fairly interesting journey as a founder over the last few years, and even the backstory before that, would love to know more.
Sure. So I began my career in high frequency trading and algo trading space in New York. This was like a while ago. I was in market making and flow trading and a bunch of prop trading firms. And but then I realized quickly that I was not making real impact. It was like taking money and making more money, which did not have. I feel like there's no tangible impact on the world. So then I went to business school and then went into tech. It's actually funny with most people after a CS degree, they go into tech, and maybe after business school, they go into trading or finance. But I did the other way around. After my CS degree, went into finance, and after my business school degree, came to tech. And my first startup after business school was Craft.co, which is a supply chain risk intelligence startup. I joined them as the first employee, and then I was there till Series A, till they grew to 50, between 50 and 100 employees. So that's where I saw all the journey, basically learn the trade of how do you build a company. We had to, pivot multiple times, change our business models, change our target audiences. So it was a roller coaster, and then now it's a Series B company. So it was a pretty good experience there. And then I joined Facebook, which is now Meta, as a PM on the Facebook search team, and then I was also on the growth team at Facebook Reality Labs. And there it was more about learning how to build products at scale. So on one hand, it's all about how do you take a product from zero to one and figure out product market fit. On the other hand, it's like, every feature you deploy hits like a few hundred million users the very next day. So it's a very different way of like thinking about product development. So that's kind of what I learned at Facebook. And then while I was at Facebook or Meta, I was always wanted to be in startups and start companies. I met my co-founder Derek, who from On Deck. So On Deck is a community of people looking to start companies, and we felt like there was a big problem for product and engineering teams to sync with marketing and sales teams, especially in the go-to-market side of things. So they call it the go-to-market gap. And we were like, okay, we want to solve that. We want to create a platform where it's easy for marketers and salespeople to track the roadmap and what's coming, and also the product people to feed into like the messaging, positioning for the marketing, and also make sure that they take into account like what salespeople are saying, what are the big deals out there, what features they are asking into that product road mapping and product development process. So that's how Ignition was born, and we raised some venture capital. We are fortunate to be backed by some really good investors like Jack Altman, Blink Capital, and Audacious Ventures. We did for a couple of years, and then AI happened. And specifically, I mean, AI has been there for almost like 10 to 20 years. It's not a new thing, but specifically the generative AI with ChatGPT and the GPT is coming, OpenAI coming out with the GPTs. So then we had to take a step back, and then we kind of figure out like um, like is this the future? Is Ignition the future? Is SaaS the future? Then we felt personally that our thesis was that agents, specifically agents, and we can talk a little bit more about what an AI agent is and what my definition of AI agent is. I'm sure there's a ton of definitions out there. So we felt like that's going to disrupt all the SaaS companies. So I feel like a lot of the SaaS companies are going to die and everything is going to be taken over by agents. We feel like SaaS companies are like a project management first. It's like At the end of the day, a SaaS tools is a place to house all your data and then collaborate with your other teammates and stakeholders and tag and analyze and visualize. AI is automation for us. It's like you need agents to like actually do your work, not just like house your work or project manage your work. And that's why we're like, okay, we got to figure out what we can do. And that's how DoubleO.ai was born. And we had figured out how to build a very reliable, agentic platform. And we made it into a horizontal version and then branded it as DoubleO.ai. And so now we help enterprises automate a lot of their workflows. Think of it as like RPA 2.0. So that's how DoubleO.ai was born. And that's where we are today in our journey.
No, this is great, and I think when we met last time, right? Like I was very intrigued by kind of the way you pivoted from Ignition into now Double O, and I think that's where kind of I want to really pull on a lot of threads there and sort of really learn because I'm seeing a lot of founders being probably a year or 2 years behind you in terms of that journey, right? And so I think so those learnings will be really valuable. But before we jump head on into kind of the US India SaaS founders and kind of the challenges they're dealing with, potential pivots, what are you seeing kind of broadly in the AI agent landscape? I mean, as a venture investor, I can tell you that it seems like every startup I'm meeting is an AI agent startup, and people seem to be building things for all sorts of enterprise use cases. How much of it is a mirage? How much of it is true? Are customers really deploying things in prod? Is this all kind of experimentation budgets, right? Like bring us up to speed on the AI agent landscape.
Yeah. So yeah, I think every YC startup is an agent startup right now, and every mom and pop is building an agent startup, which at the end of the day, the target market is also huge. So there are going to be several winners. But yeah, it's like the number of agent startups are, like it's like probably hundreds and hundreds of companies are building the same. They are pivoting, building different for different use cases. I think there's two different use cases in my mind. I mean, if you take a step back, the whole tech stack is being rebuilt, right? The traditional tech stack was like you have like a database, like a MongoDB or SQL, and then you had your Node.js backend, and then you had your React front end, and you had an enterprise SaaS application, and most of the tools for that. And the peak of the 2018, 2019 was the peak of SaaS hype where you had every company using like until 2020, like 50 to 100 tools. And I felt like there was a peak. And now what's happening is like the entire tech stack is being rebuilt all the way from, if you think about the LLMs are the foundational layer, and then the skyscrapers are going to be built on top of those foundations. So there's huge opportunities. So whether it's like you're building, so we are on the application layer, we're trying to like use those foundational models to actually solve problems and for the enterprises. But every step, whether it's evaluation, fine tuning, training, like every layer in the whole stack has like hundreds of startups building companies, right? So and then what we are seeing is like there's two cases which are really working well. Like one is the vertical use cases, whether it's the AI SDR. I know 11x.ai, they raised like 50 million Series D, and then there's like AI SDR. So that's AI SDR, there's AI recruiter, AI marketer. There's AI for content writing, AI for law firms, AI for financial analysts, AI for accounting. So all the vertical use cases, I think there'll be several winners in the space, which again going to disrupt all the SaaS tools in that space. Like if you think about all the previous SaaS tools, they're actually like kind of replacing, but not just SaaS tools. To some part, to some extent, they're also like augmenting headcount, right? Because almost like instead of hiring a junior analyst or somebody else, you're actually employing agents. So that's the automation piece versus a project management piece here. So those are the ones which are taking off. And then there's a horizontal piece, which platforms like us, like DoubleO.ai, and there's like so many platforms where it's more like providing a no code easy way for building agents for any use case specifically. Not like vertical stuff, but and then for us it's more about automating, like whether it's you doing due diligence, onboarding, like insurance is doing like underwriting, and then it could also be used for marketing and sales use cases. It could be as simple as like, hey, build me an agent where go through all my calendar invites for this week, see who's on the calendar invite, go do a bunch of research on them, and tell me about topics I want to speak to them about, and send me an email before the call. Like generally, you have some sales ops or DevOps person doing this, and now you have an agent doing this. Or obviously writing blogs is the easiest, rather on the marketing side, or coming up with a competitive a switch campaign where you go analyze all the competitors and find out what they're bad at and write an email to all their clients pitching your product, right? All of that before maybe a product marketer would do that. Now an AI agent for product marketing is going to do that. So I think there are different use cases here which are taking off. So it's very exciting. It's like very fast, exciting, fascinating, and it reminds me of the time when when iOS became a thing and Uber, DoorDash, and multi-billion-dollar companies were built on top of mobile. But I think this impact of AI is going to be 10x more than that.
And then in terms of just deployments themselves, like how much of the space right now is experiments or kind of really hacking around versus really being deployed at scale? Like are you seeing instances where large enterprise customers are putting a stake in the ground and saying that, look, we are going to deploy these agents for very mission critical use cases and do it at scale?
Yeah, it's I can tell you one thing that a lot of the C-level folks at largest companies, they're not sleeping well because they know that their company is going to be disrupted by an AI startup, which is in kind of a YC batch right now, and they are like, especially the ones in the mid cycle, right? The Series BC companies with like 10 or 20 million in revenue, they are at the highest risk. They don't have enough network effects to defend their business model, and so they don't have a choice. They have to deploy and inject AI to automate further. Otherwise, they are dead. It's almost like it's innovator's dilemma, but compounded by the speed at which they need to get it done by disrupting their existing product. So yeah, I think, but the larger enterprises are a little bit hesitant, not because that they don't realize the value, but they are worried about the data, like the trust and privacy and security and compliance. So there's all other factors which we're still not sure about. They are very concerned that their data is going to be used for training and like all the other concerns. So they are moving at a little bit slower pace than they would like to. But all the mid-stage companies, you adapt fast or you die. You don't have a choice.
And I know, I mean, there's a lot of talk about hallucinations and even just the fact that is the technology ready to really drive these business outcomes at scale. What are you seeing in terms of the tech stacks, especially the foundational LLMs? I mean, both open source as well as the closed ones like OpenAI. Are they how are they kind of improving? How are kind of enterprise customers dealing with the hallucination part of it?
Yeah, so that's a real problem today. In fact, that's why we started building DoubleO.ai, because even though it's so easy to get from zero to demo, right? So it's anybody can get to a zero to demo, but then getting from demo to production is another beast. It's a very different problem. The simplest example is like, let's say I have a workflow where I have like 10 steps. Like step one, talked about the competitor campaign, where step one, go to a competitor website. Step two, scrape the website. Step three, go to some review site. Step four, scrape the review. Step five, find the strength. Step six, find the weakness. When you try to do this with an agent, it's so easy to do a one-off demo, right? But if you try to do it reliably for hundreds of competitors, it's going to like randomly stop at step four.
Yeah.
Or step seven is going to be researching a completely different competitor. It's
Yeah.
going to come up with strengths of a random company. Like it happens all the time, and then it's not about whether we can solve it. That's the wrong question. It's the inherent nature of the beast. It's a very different way you need to think about LLMs. Traditionally, software developers, they used to, like, if you write a if then else code, you execute it a million times, you are guaranteed to get the same answer. But in LLMs, you're guaranteed to get different answer a lot of the times because that's just the nature of the beast. So the way you actually think about how you make it into a very reliable production level automation in your systems is like, you need to have, like, for each step, every model, you need to have like a coordinating agent, you need to have a multiple agents, like coordinating the work, checking the work, supervising the work. So there's different techniques. Obviously, like LMs are good at reasoning. So you need to like use like some kind of a self-reflection. You need to ask LLMs like, hey, are you sure you came up with the right competitor? So you need to use a lot of the different techniques to put together a system which actually works.
Got it. Got it. No, this is fascinating, and I think now that we have set up the landscape, I really want to bring in this view into the lens of a US India SaaS startup, right? And I think that's kind of the topic I want to go deep into. And the way I want to structure this conversation is really take each life cycle stage of a founder, and each of them are dealing with different kind of issues, right? As they're transitioning from pre-chat GPT SaaS into now kind of post-chat GPT AI first. the agentic world that we are kind of already entered in. So I want to start with first the 0 to 1 idea stage founder, right? So for a founder today based in India, picking up a problem statement really at the idea stage, what are some of the considerations the founders need to keep in mind as they are now kind of really starting the company on day zero, in going after, the AI space?
Yeah, I think the first, of course, the fundamentals don't change, right? At the end of the day, the fundamentals like, are you solving a real problem? Is there a big market for that problem? Just because you came up with a cool AI demo doesn't mean it's going to fly. And obviously, if you wanted to be a venture-backed startup, you need to really think about like how you going to get to like 100 billion in 5 years, right? Is it a really big market? And what does the competition look like? What's the landscape look like? So the fundamentals are obviously the same thing as how it was even 5 years ago. But then once you figure out like that, the first step is still like making sure that you're working on the right problem and going after the right market. Like that's like rule number one. You don't even think about AI before that. And then when you start building solutions is when we're like, okay, that's when these things, when we just talked about previously, comes into questions like, can you actually build a reliable solution using AI for this problem? For example, if you are building something in the marketing land, like, the simplest one is like, okay, you are building a go-to-market campaign or you're building a blog. That's completely fine because it doesn't have to be deterministic. But if you're going after problems which require deterministic solutions, then it's probably not a good idea because you'll have really tough time not just building a solution, but also like convincing enterprises to adopt your solution. So we have seen in our own use cases where any workflow which requires a deterministic, uh, so let's say, for example, a matching use case. Let's say you get a bunch of people from some system and you got to match it with a bunch of people from Y system. And it needs to be 100% correct. You can't fail even one out of the time, 1 out of 10 times. Or if it's like a trading bot, when you have to like make sure you are placing trades, right? LLMs probably are not the right fit for that because it's basically you need to use a hybrid solution of like the traditional deterministic systems and LLMs to do only for the analysis side. So that's kind of how you need to think about it. But for the non-deterministic solutions, AI is great. In fact, for the non-deterministic solutions, if you're not using AI, then what you're even building? It's like we are in the middle of a generational shift in technology, right? So it all comes down to making sure you can build a version which works reliably. Then the last factor is the speed. This AI world is moving at an infinite, like it's just so crazy. It just feels even months or like years for me. Even 2 months ago, where we are, it's like, and the pace at which the new models are coming up. Now we have O1. I'm sure Anthropic will come up with a new model soon, and Google will drop their Gemini 2.0 sometime. So the space at which this is moving. I mean, if you think about it, earlier this year, I wouldn't be having this conversation at all. If we had, even like 6 months ago, if you had a podcast, we'll be talking about different things. So you got to be really, really fast. You got to move at like that's the third thing. I mean, obviously startups are required to move fast, but it's even like 10x more than what the previous expectations were.
And on the speed point, one of the kind of, I would say, under the surface frustrations I'm seeing with a lot of India-based founders is that they feel a little bit left behind just because all the action is happening in the Bay Area, right? So this is where all the fundamental shifts are happening. What are some of the things that kind of Indian founders can do to really kind of be up to speed, right? To be able to actually get that speed, you also need information. You need the right inputs at the right time.
I find all my information on Twitter. Even though I live in the Bay Area, it just follow this, you know, go find the top 100 companies or top 50 companies, go find their founders, follow the companies and their founders, then follow who they follow. That's it. You have a feed which will give you all the latest information. That's how I find the latest rack technology or the latest LLM technique to reduce hallucinations, all on Twitter. Of course, the ecosystem really helps if because so many meetups. Even we also organize monthly AI agent meetups here. So it's really helpful to like meet in person and exchange like information of what's working, what's not, what vector database should I use or anything like that. But I think a lot of the time you can just get it on Twitter. I think there is a false perception that you need to be in Silicon Valley for that. You can be anywhere in the world and get it. The only reason the Silicon Valley helps is for capital.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, it still hasn't changed even in 10 years. 10 years ago, when I left US, I went to London and then came back. Everyone was like, oh, Silicon Valley's done. There's a Silicon Alley in New York and some FinTech Alley in London. and all that. Obviously, Bangalore is like, I think, the second biggest after Silicon Valley. It's probably going to surpass all the other countries. But at the end of the day, it's still like the capital is here. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, because it's like you have to raise capital. So the best advice is like you can get all the information on Twitter. Just stay connected with founders, stay connected with investors. But if you want to raise capital and also hire some really good talent, maybe you can come here. Or if you want to build your go-to-market team, then it's probably like a good idea to build in the US, especially if you want to go after US markets. But in terms of just product and engineering talent, you don't need to be here. I think you can get all the information online, just being in the right groups.
And I mean, I think going back to your earlier point, I think one of the things I'm really pushing very early stage, pre-seed idea stage founders in the US India corridor is to really think much more deeply about differentiation and right to win. I think I think with AI, the competitive landscape has just gone into a different orbit, right? And I mean, there's obviously a global gold rush happening, but I think just the ubiquity of being able to build any product, any use case, I mean, very soon almost everyone can be a developer, right? So when you live in this kind of a world, you need to be, as a founder, be very, very intellectually honest and rigorous about why you will win, right? What is your unique differentiation? Or even from a technology perspective, do you go deeper into specific verticals or into specific areas, right? I mean, I think that was one of the big problems the last decade with sort of Indian SaaS, where it became very, very incremental. And I think with AI, that's almost like it's come to that precipitating point where you can no longer build in an incremental way. I mean, you'll get just killed by some company, not even from Silicon Valley, but from like Eastern Europe or LATAM.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And that's another thing. I feel like AI is also going to decentralize innovation, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the talent here, like all the code gen tools and everything which is coming up, you don't need that level of like talent density. Having said that, obviously, like India has a ton of talent, but it's even beyond India. It's just globally, it's going to decentralize the AI product development, which is exciting for I think humanity in general. The other thing I would say for specifically for Indian founders is like I feel like this is just a cultural thing. I feel like the other thing is obviously like the Indian ecosystem. So we have an engineering team in India. So I'm in Bangalore every 3 months or 6 months there. So I kind of have a good ecosystem. So the really amazing density of talent, but also I feel like the innovation culture here is getting, I think it's getting really good in Bangalore, but it's already established in Silicon Valley. Meaning what I mean is like if a founder makes it, like let's say if I make a bunch of money, the first thing I do is invest in a bunch of my friends and startups, and that's a giving back culture, and that's a very strong. Even in Europe, right, when I was in London, when somebody made a big exit, they would just go to south of France and buy some mansion and retire. It's not like they would become a VC or something and give back, right? And that's why even Europe is suffering, but that culture is amazing, right? So I hope we can build that in Bangalore and Gurgaon and other centers in India. The second thing I feel like also is like founders are always rolled out the red carpet in Silicon Valley. You're always treated really, really well, which is not the same. I've seen because I've been in Bangalore, I've been in London. It's not all the same. It's more like, obviously you are a VC, so like a lot of the times there's a little bit of I wouldn't say like entitlement is not the right word, but like I tried to have a meeting with a VC in Bangalore, and he showed up after 1 hour, and he was like he didn't read anything about me, he didn't know anything about me. Just like there's a lot of that kind of thing. Whereas here, people are already well prepared, and they're like, they're founder, they know like not to waste founders' time. Founders are the most precious. So there's also that aspect, which I think makes the Silicon Valley like what it is in the last 10 years. So I hope we can take all of these aspects of giving back, this culture of celebrating founders and then export it to centers like Bangalore and Gurgaon, where they can build an very thriving AI ecosystem there, and maybe you can lead the charge.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think it's already kind of starting to happen. I think the Indian ecosystem is kind of almost on an exponential curve in terms of
Yeah,
maturity. And I think now, like when I started my career in venture in 2011, there were absolutely no role models. I mean, the only role models were Narayan Murthy and Azim Premji.
yeah,
And now in the last 10 years, we have the Bansals and and the bhavishes, right? That young founders are looking up to. And now I think as more exits are happening, I mean, the Indian public markets are ripping, so a lot of IPOs are happening. So I think now that liquidity cycle is kind of really starting to happen, and hopefully a lot of that will get back into the ecosystem. And so yeah, it's I think it's going to be really exciting times in the next decade. But moving on, the second aspect of that 0 to 1 stage, right, which is the MVP. And I mean, I've been kind of in that shoe myself, as when I was doing my startup, right? You end up kind of really reading up and sort of seeing all these case studies of how, waitlist to, how Dropbox kind of hacked something that went viral. And you also, so most of the content out there around MVPs is kind of from the pre-AI paradigm, right? And I think the world has changed a lot. I mean, one is, of course, I think customers have a lot more clutter. They're dealing with a lot of cognitive overload. The bar in general of building software has gone up as well. And now with AI, of course, like I think the complexity of building anything has dramatically reduced. So how should founders kind of think about specking out the MVP across various use cases on the enterprise side? What are some of the interesting things you are seeing, right? Like, I mean, you have built products in the pre chat GPT world as well, right? Like that V1, how has that V1 changed, 5 years back versus today?
Yeah, I think the the right answer to that is it's become so much easier to build an MVP. If you think about 10 years ago, first I was like, I would used to, so basically the way I did my first MVP, like, I built something myself, but also hired people on Upwork and then had to hire a dev shop or dev agency and then had to build my first MVP. Took a little bit of time. There's like a lot of PRD and design. And when Figma was like getting better, before it was like I forgot the name. Like it was hard, and then even 2 years ago, it became drastically different. And from MVP, some people as like MLP, there was minimum lovable product is actually usable and people can see the value and maybe even put on a credit card. Now with AI, it's like, hey, you can actually build a product, like not just an MVP or an MLP, but like at least like one full working feature end to end, right? So the expectations of the bar has gone up significantly from, more from a consumer standpoint or even from a purchase or a buyer standpoint. It's like, if I see some janky UI, which is like, if you say it's MVP, I'm like, people are like, no, 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 come back to me when you have like a full product, because it's the bar to like actually do a full product is like not that high, with all the GitHub copilots and the cursors and of the world and all these code gen tools out there. So the way I think now, it's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because the curse is because the expectation of the bar is so high, but people no longer want to like use your MVP or put on the credit card. But the blessing is like it's so much more easier to actually build at least like one good feature from your product end to end. So when you plan your MVP, it's no longer an MVP. I think the whole MVP has to go away. It's actually like a real, fully functionable, usable feature you can actually get in front of users before you ask them to put down the credit card today.
Yeah, it was very interesting. A couple of days back, I saw on X one user who was, by the way, an ex-founder herself. She was posting screenshots of kind of she downloaded an AI parenting assistant, and then there was literally a thread of screenshots of, oh, it's spamming me. All the screenshots have kind of null error messages and a bunch of things that are not working. And I'm like, look, I mean, this is clearly, the user knew that this is kind of a really early version of the app, and the user has been a founder herself. But then, it's just the bar has gone up so much now.
Exactly. I mean, you see all these apps. I mean, there is like all these no code tools. I mean, the no code tools came in before Gen AI came in, and they were trying to like help with all this development for MVPs. But now you can literally like, sometimes you don't even need a technical co-founder. If you're a non-technical person, you could actually use AI to, build it from the ground up, even if you have a little bit of a technical knowledge. So that's how the whole, early mock-ups and all of them have changed. So, I mean, it's also empowering, right? Now, I hope like, if you look at historically, most of the co-founders have always been from an engineering background, right? I mean, I'm from an engineering background too, and also even if you're a VC, you're always like, hey, who's a technical co-founder, right? But I feel like in a year or 2 years from now, it'll always be normal to have like two completely non-technical founders building like this, the MVPs, then raising money.
Yep, totally. I mean, I think we are the next 10 years, probably, at least as a VC, I feel that I'm really watching out for narrative violations, because all of us have seen so many patterns of how things have happened, and especially in the mobile and cloud wave in the last 10 years. So there's a lot of things that we kind of really almost subconsciously look for. And I just feel that this is such a big step function that a lot of those things will just go out of the window. And so you have to be really, really open to thinking grounds up, and seeing kind of, even from a team constitution perspective to, how much traction. Like, I mean, a million ARR 6 years back had a lot of weightage. And today I'm seeing almost every second company is coming in and walking into the million ARR.
Yeah, 100%. And then yeah, it's just like so that's another interesting thing. Like let's talk about that. Like I think what I am seeing, at least here, is a lot of these AI startups, they get to a million or 2 million very quickly
Yeah.
because they demo really well and then they're able to get like upfront annual contracts. But there's also another big problem. It's churn. So if you also ask them about retention, the churn is pretty high and the retention is pretty low because of the same thing we talked about like 10 minutes ago, because it's so hard to build a reliable agentic system which actually works every time. So I feel like there's also a lot of that right now where you have really good demos and people are like, oh hell, I want that, and they put down their credit card, buy an annual upfront deal, but they don't renew or they churn. So it's actually still a mix of that, but you're right. I mean, either way, I think like the 1 million ARR is definitely no longer like something to raise a Series A for. Like before, you could even with a 500,000 you could raise a Series A, but right now it's much easier to go much beyond that.
Yep, yeah, totally. I think I love how kind of Brad Gerstner of Altimeter, he talks about the endurance of revenue, right? I think that's going to be really key, while evaluating AI startups going forward. But moving on to the next stage, right? So I call this the early traction stage. So a bunch of SaaS startups again started, let's say 2019 to 2021, that time frame. A bunch of them hit that early 100K to a million ARR kind of attraction. And now with AI, a lot of them are being forced to almost go back to the drawing board. I mean, a lot of those really, really core assumptions have changed, or the problem set has widened, or the team constitution or the capitalization structure of the company as well is not kind of really keeping pace with what's really happening outside in the landscape, right, and with customers. So in this particular stage in kind of the US-India SaaS ecosystem, how do you advise founders, think about it? Because it's a very tricky stage, right? I mean, you have a business, right? You have a running business, so you can't just like rip it apart. You have
Yeah,
investors on the cap table, right? You have employees who have probably 30, 40, 50 people. You have an office. And now, but in your heart of hearts that, hey, like this is, things are changing very massively in terms of, what I intended to build out versus what I'm dealing with today.
exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no easy answer. That's like a $1 million question right there. I think the what I would do in their shoes is like, first of all, don't be in denial, don't be defensive, don't keep saying that, oh, AI is like too far away, it's just a hype, it'll go away. No, it's not a hype, it's coming after your business. That's number one, acceptance. The second thing is, once you have that acceptance, then you have to come up with a strategy where you have to figure out, maybe either you hire an in-house AI team, AI engineering team, to see how you can not just infuse AI in your existing product, but also rethink your product from the ground up, from first principles. The lot of the hesitation comes there, because a lot of the times what you try to do is like, you just jam an open AI API into your existing product and call it an AI product. It doesn't work. People see through that. And then probably there's another startup which is actually building a way better product from first principles. So you really got to think from ground up, from first principles. Or you could use existing, I mean, you could use like, that's where DoubleO.ai comes in, where you could use a platform like ours to like kind of build agents for your use case and see if you can quickly validate that with your end customers, and something that you want to like then start like building an alternative go-to-market motion for that product. And if that takes off, then you can slowly play the game where you have this kind of going, but kind of also like, hitting the peak, and then you have the AI product like rapidly growing on the side. So that's kind of how I would approach it myself.
Yeah, I think the key word here seems to be courage, right? And I think both founders and investors kind of need to have that courage of saying that, look, we can't be afraid of stripping something down to the bones and kind of sort of rebuilding, right? Based on the new market reality, because that's kind of the need of the hour.
Exactly. It's like the sunk cost. Just because you have a really big money in the pot, but if you have bad hands and you know that you have bad hands, you got to fold, or you got to figure out like what you're going to do, because I think that's it. I mean, once you come out of denial, once you actually accept that this technology is going to change, your company, then you automatically, you're a founder. You've been through this. You've been through roller coasters. I mean, there's a reason you're a Series BC company because you are endured through this. So you will figure it out. But just make sure you move fast and don't be in denial.
So moving on to the more of a growth stage, right? So, companies that have kind of already had PMF, so probably let's say even 10 million to 50 million ARR. So they are dealing with a very different challenge. They are dealing with actually the AI native or AI first startups of today, right? So I don't know who you consider as competition for DoubleO.ai, right? But I'm sure that company is kind of scared of companies like yourself because these are now a day zero company today. The founders are starting from a blank slate. A lot of them are taking a very different approach. The mental models are different. How can large companies kind of deal with this transition, and including like, do they go inorganic? It's a PMF business, right? I mean, and you still have investors. You need to probably give an exit to the investors as well. There is a business. There are customers, right? And you still also don't want to leave the advantages that you have built and accrued over the last, let's say, 7, 8 years in getting the business to that point. So how do you deal with that transition?
Yeah, I think the key there is like your existing relationships. Your customers are more likely to trust you who's an existing vendor, who's an existing relationship with especially AI, because everyone's kind of scared about AI, especially about the data and what they can do. But if you already have a trusted relationship with your client and they know that you're a good person, you're delivering your product works, you should double down on that. Because what a new AI startup cannot do is that, because it takes, like we know, it takes a lot of time to build your brand, to build your trust, to build the relationship with your clients. And that's where I would lean on. It's just like the trust factor, like saying that, hey, look, I know that we've been building this product for a while and you trust us, but now there's this new technology, Gen AI, which is like changing everything. But we are keeping up with the trends, and in fact, we have the second thing is the data. You probably have a ton of data, and then you could probably use the data to train, maybe fine tune your own model. I mean, depending on the use case, it could be applicable or not. And then second one is like data mode, having the data mode. So yeah, I would basically lean on relationships and trust, and then second on the data.
Yeah, and I think all of us, especially in the early stage ecosystem, we keep underlining kind of the rate of change, the speed, but also, it's important to take a step back and say that, look, this is probably a 20, 30-year game, right? So obviously we are seeing a lot of that early traction. I mean, it seems to be very reminiscent of kind of the mid to late 90s era in the internet, right? And I think as things panned out, a lot of those things were just kind of false positives, and the real use cases only emerged a few years in. And again, I think it's always dangerous to extrapolate, but
Yeah.
but also as a company that already has PMF, has those relationships, you can also, you don't, I mean, your rate of learning can be fast, but you can also be strategic about it and say, look, let me kind of, I'll see this play out, right? And you want to be still in the game when kind of the dust settles, and and there is going to be a shakeout at some point.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only difference is, like, I would say, is like we talked about speed, right? How fast this world is changing. Like in previous innovations, when between iOS 1 and 2, whatever versions, they were like a year, 2 years gap.
Yeah.
Here between GPT like 3.5 and 4, and then O1 is months. So unfortunately, you don't have that much of a cushion like previous versions. Previous versions of the technology, changes. So unfortunately, you gotta move fast. So you can maybe be patient for some months, but you don't have years.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Yep, yep, yep. No, well said. Coming to business models, I think there is again, the prevailing sentiment is that business models are going to change rapidly, and kind of the per seat SaaS business model is going to be done and dusted. What are some of the AI first business models that you are seeing around you? And I know it's very early days, and I'm sure a lot of these are being stress tested right now. But what are some of the paradigms that you can share, which will be helpful for kind of US India SaaS founders and AI founders right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, we are also experimenting. We haven't figured it out. It's a new paradigm. But the per seat model is dead, I think, in this world. Nobody wants to pay per seat and like all that. I think we are seeing more and more usage-based and consumption-based model.
Yep.
And that's what we are also leaning towards. And pretty much I mean, they are, obviously the AI SDR, which I talked about, they still have like a fixed amount, like 4K a month, and you get like 1,000 leads a month or something like that. And there are those business models which are also coming up. So it's more, but at the end of the day, I think it's consumption based. Either I give you X leads or either you get X calls. We are like step based. It's like for every 1,000 steps, it's 500. And each step is like step one, go crawl a competitor website. Step two, go send an email. So each is a step. So I think those are the models which we are coming up. But there's also the enterprise layer, which is like, oh, you need SSO, you need additional security. There's a platform fee. So it's probably like there's a platform fee. There's like a minimum usage fee to use the platform, and then for that you get X number of credits. And about that, it's basically like usage based. Like for steps or number of for chatbots or support, it's messages. Like you had like $100 per 1,000 messages or something, and for us it's like $500 per 1,000 steps. And then there's credits. OpenAI has obviously the tokens. So yeah, I think usage based, I think, is going to be the one which wins, I think.
And what are you seeing in terms of anchoring on outcomes? Because I know that's again a big change, right? Where a lot of products are going in with kind of the outcome first, and the whole paradigm is kind of changing a lot there as well. Are you seeing any impact of that framing on kind of business models and pricing?
Yeah, can you give me an example here?
So basically saying that, look, I mean, my AI SDR or my AE will kind of deliver these many leads, right? Or my kind of blogs, like so it's almost like you're replacing a human being, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And saying that I'm going to kind of deliver this much of productivity, essentially on
yeah,
that
yeah.
perspective, right? So I'll take care of as a startup what my infrastructure is, what my LLM costs are, but you can let go of these like whatever 2 or 3 headcounts.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's also kind of consumption based, but yeah, it's like
Yeah,
outcome based. So yeah, AI SDR, that's, even tasks are those, but the problem right now is like, I don't think they are guaranteeing any SLA. Like,
yeah,
I don't think any, some of the business model innovations with the AI startups can actually lean on is like, what does an SLA even mean in the agentic world, right?
mm,
So in the traditional world, you can have downtime, that SLA and all that, support SLA, but like in a LLM world, there's a lot of hallucinations. You don't really control them. What does an SLA even mean, right? So how do you guarantee any outcome? That's something when we think a lot about. Like, I think somebody who can crack that and then include that in the business model can do really well, right? So it's outcome based, but also outcome combined with some level of SLA. Like, these are actually going to be like leads which will convert to paying clients, for example.
yep. Great. And then finally, I want to kind of talk about the most pressing thing that any US India corridor founder is always dealing with, which is US go to market, right? And so this is this is almost besides AI, but generally in terms of building a US India corridor startup, you start a company in India, you have some early validation, come to the US, you're looking for those early design partners, kind of understand the market, get those relationships going. Most of these founders actually come in with like not very established networks or track records in the US. What are some of the things that they can do? What are some of the best practices, playbooks that you have seen work really well, even in your own startups, your own career, or what you observed in the ecosystem in general?
Yeah, I think it's all about relationships, building relationships. Like, my Facebook job was a referral from a friend from my business school. My first check was my colleague, and everything. I think we met because of a mutual friend of ours. So at the end of the day, it's all about relationships. So being a founder is being a salesperson. At the end of the day, it's not just about building the right product or being a really good engineer. You are the face of your company. You are a salesperson first, and you need to figure out how to build relationships. So attend really high quality networking events. Don't just go to any random networking event. Make sure go to better networking events. Tap your network, and if you don't have a network, maybe join any of this. Like, I joined on deck exactly for that reason, so that I can get access to all these people who are looking to start companies. So there's like South Park Commons, on deck. There's a bunch of like networks here. Then obviously there's like India focused groups, entrepreneurship groups here. There's other groups here which does meetups. So build relationships, like learn how to speak to people, learn how to add value first. Don't just the other mistake I see is a lot of Indian founders. They do come here and then say, I'm raising. The first thing you say, hi, my name is X, my product is this, I'm raising. So don't do that. First talk about, like, oh, I was a really good AI engineer. Okay, what are you working on? Okay, Here's what I learned about some new rack technique. Just add value first, and then connect with them. And then in your second conversation, then tell that you're racing. So figure out how you can add value. Figure out how you can build relationships. Join some of these networks here. Attend as many of these networking events. Yeah, become a salesperson and learn how to like do small talk. Learn how to like build that kind of like a network, meet a lot of people. I've seen so many companies, and I know people who knew nobody, and they raise like at least 2 to 3 million seats here. So there are many companies are successful. You got to hustle, and that's the one advice I would offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we both have seen how the chain of introductions and connections and referrals, it can grow very quickly, especially in the Bay Area, right? And the whole pay it forward mindset. So I think it's really about. I think I love that framing of, as a founder, you have to almost think of yourself. I mean, of course, most founders are engineers and they are kind of product builders, but you're almost equally important as your role as a salesperson and being the face of the company.
Exactly.
This has been a great conversation, Karthik. I think I'm glad that we chatted about this particular topic because I think you have kind of been transitioning as well from Ignition into DoubleO.ai, and I think a lot of these learnings have been very, very, very fresh. And I think as a lot of other founders in the US-India SaaS corridor are undergoing similar challenges. So I think these were really, really beneficial, really kind of practical tips. So thank you so much for taking out time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Had a really good conversation. Hope people find value. And I just want to say that if you want to connect with me, please connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. On Twitter, my handle is Karthik Suresh. On LinkedIn is Karthik Suresh. Yes, thank you so much.